Hello.
Okay, well, welcome. Happy Friday, everybody. Thank you for being here. This is a new thing we started this year that seems to be going really well. You know, at COC board meetings, we have things that we have to do, like the charter and governance stuff that isn't always that informative or fun, but the important work that it takes to keep us legal. And we have a lot of new board members and community members that are involved, and the system's always changing. So every other month, we do a COC board meeting that takes care of the business of the COC. And then on alternating months, we do these Zoom calls that no votes are conducted, nothing is discussed that would require us to be meeting in person. And we use it as an educational moment to learn about different parts of the system. And today we're going to talk about diversion and prevention. Some of you that have been around for a long time know that this has been the area of the system that needs the most work. It is a successful component to any system, and one that in Pinellas County for a long time had not had much focus or funding. And we're working really hard to do more diversion and prevention, not only the HLA, but quite a few providers out there, and to align all of those resources together. I think earlier this year, I was on another webinar call that likened it to the bathtub. And I really loved that visual, because unless you can turn off the water flow, then, we can never drain the water out of the tub fast enough, just because it takes a long time to find housing. And we also know that diversion and prevention is the most trauma-informed way to support our clients, so they don't have a +1 on their ACE score by having to relocate, or in some cases, we do relocate with diversion, but not go into an institutional setting such as shelter. So I think Kaylee is going to share her screen with our slides, and I am just going to do a quick introduction with our staff. This is a time to be an employee in the community. Lots of folks are moving around, and there's lots of opportunity in the system. So there are a lot of new faces here, but we are really excited to have 3 new diversion specialists, as some of our diversion team moved on. They're still in the COC. They're in other parts of the system, but they're not with us. And we have Kitty Dean, who is the lead diversion specialist right now. Isaac, who came to us from child welfare. TV, who moved here from North Carolina TV also speaks Spanish, and we're excited to have her and Amani. And then, of course, Charlie. So Charlie is based out at Safe Harbor and has been around quite some time along with Kitty, but they are still a part of this very important team. So I just wanted you to have a face to go with the name. Many of them are on today. And so we are excited to be able to share more with you about what the focus of diversion and prevention is. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kaylee.
Okay, so I'm Kaylee Saganowski, the HLA Program Management Analyst and Advisor, and I'm going to talk today about a big picture look at the different prevention, eviction diversion, and diversion programs. So as you can see here with the funnel, our options for intervention go from less intensive to more intensive. And our prevention and eviction diversion services are offered to our clients who are at risk, whereas once they fall below that dotted line and become literally homeless, diversion is going to be the best intervention for them. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about all of these separately. So homeless prevention clients, these are our households who currently have housing, but are at high risk of homelessness. So these might be your extremely low income folks. They could be already doubled up with friends or family. These are your folks that are just one crisis away from facing homelessness. And so some of the activities that are typically offered through prevention, most frequently in our COC, case management services are provided, along with short-term rental assistance and other financial assistance, which might be application fees, utility payments, help with moving expenses, things like that. And then at the bottom, I've also listed other prevention activities. These are things that might be occasionally offered through some providers, but they're not widespread in our COC and they're not consistently offered. But in the future, should funding and capacity allow for it, these are things that would obviously help our clients, would obviously prevent homelessness. And so these are things just to kind of think about in the future as goals for future prevention activities. So next we have eviction prevention. This is for households who are low income and threatened with eviction. Eviction stays on a client's record for up to 7 years, and it makes it a lot harder for a client to find new housing once they have been evicted. So we want to do everything that we can to help them avoid eviction. That's why we say eviction is not just a condition of poverty, but it's also a cause of it. So as most of you know, the HLA has been partnering with community law to offer an eviction diversion program. And this is where it gets a little bit confusing. So our eviction diversion program is actually a prevention activity because it takes place when the clients are still in their housing. So some of the eviction prevention activities that are offered through our partnership with community law would be anything that helps resolve landlord-tenant issues. So that might be mediation, just a phone call with both parties to figure out what the issue is, or that could be mediation in court. That could also be help with housing navigation to help our clients find an alternative housing situation once their lease ends. And it could also be rental and utility assistance to help with any past due payments that are owed to the landlord if that is the cause of the issue. And then last, we've got diversion. This is for households who have already lost their housing and are about to either enter shelter or sleep outside tonight. And this can also include our clients that are already in emergency shelter or rapid rehousing programs. And so diversion activities, some of the services that are most frequently offered in our COC are conflict mediation to help a client retain current housing. So say that there's a young adult who lives with his parents, they get in an argument and he gets kicked out. Our diversion specialists can work together with that young adult and the parents to try to see if the issues can be resolved and he can stay in that housing unit. Alternatively, our diversion specialist would also work with him to see if there are friends or family in the area where he could go and stay with them and potentially even offer to pay for utilities or grocery expenses, things like that that would increase with another household member. Or if there's friends or family out of state, we could also help with travel aid that could get the client to the new housing if he's welcome from the friends or family. And then, as you saw with prevention, there's also a few other diversion activities listed here at the bottom: employment assistance and credit repair and budgeting. These are things that occasionally pop up in Pinellas through clinics and things like that, but they're not widely offered. But again, that is a goal for the future should funding and capacity allow for it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dominique to talk about how people typically flow through the system.
Good morning, everyone. Dominique Randall, Homeless Crisis Response Supervisor here at the HLA. In a previous meeting on coordinated entry, we discussed how it's probably one of my favorite analogies. You may have heard it a couple hundred times over the past few years, but how coordinated entry is a hospital. It is how you access the hospital is the intake flow of that process. I want to add to that analogy and talk about prevention, diversion, program, and process. When we look at this, we have information where people are presenting when people are presenting at, thank you. When people are presenting at prevention services, they're trying to identify kind of what the symptoms are. If I have high blood sugar, I'm going to start taking medication and regulating my diet. And if needed, I'm going to start taking medication. That's the prevention process, right? That's an early intervention to hopefully prevent long-term needs and services, preventative maintenance. When that's not happening, we're looking at the emergency action of it. So we're talking about the program and the process of diversion. The process of diversion is what I call the first aid. It is anyone can do this. Anyone can be equipped with the skills to reach out and connect to somebody and talk through the options and opportunities available to them. We do this, you do this all the time with friends and families that in your immediate vicinity, people that you know and people around you. The way we do that is when we try and find and identify resources, right? When we look at the strengths of ourselves, our clients, our family, and identify places for them to go. That's the first aid. That's the process of diversion. However, we're going to talk more today about the program diversion, and that is the paramedic. That's when you've assessed this need, right? Your child falls and, breaks their leg off their bike, right? You've assessed that need, and now's maybe time to call in somebody else and make that emergency call. So the paramedic's going to come out and assess further to determine if that person needs to access services and if this truly is a true housing crisis emergency, or if they can triage it and allow the person to remain in their situation or redirect them to a healthy, safe situation. Some of the data in our community since October of 2020, we've been able to serve over 784 families. Almost 500 of those have been through diversion strategies, and this is the program through our diversion team here at the HLA, and over 175 households through prevention. We've had a success rate of 53% for closed cases. Of those, 77% have remained housed for 30 days, and 70% have remained housed for 90 days. As you see here, those exiting permanent housing within the next 12 months have been very low. Diversion is one step of the process. It is not the end all be all, the only solution. Nationwide, diversion success rates are averaging around 30%. We're seeing a much higher percentage of success in our community. And it really is about identifying and locating resources within their own support network and their strengths of our clients to help build them up. And with that, I want to transition a little bit to a little bit of an education piece. You may be familiar with the National Alliance to End Homelessness. They have 5 principles that they identify for homeless prevention. And yes, prevention is, like I said, that more long-term preventative maintenance. And then, diversion is that immediacy that potentially could lead to redirection. But with these 5 principles, it really helps direct our service delivery and how we do that with prevention and diversion services. So principle 1 is about crisis resolution. Crisis resolution is looking at making sure that our individuals are going to a place that's safe. We are doing rapid de-escalation. That's where I was talking about that paramedic response. Rapid assessment, we need to be able to look at a situation and have an idea or a solution pretty quickly. And one of the major pieces of that is we're gonna have to de-escalate the emotions, the behaviors, or the action of the clients we're working with. When I am personally speaking, if I am presenting, if I'm in crisis, I'm not going to present as my best self. So to de-escalate that will help us to think more rationally, it will help us to be more resourceful, and helps us define action steps that can be successful and things that we can achieve. Our clients have control. We have control over our own process, and we need to change that mindset to regaining control and work towards problem solving, solution behaviors. Principle 2 is about client choice. It's about respect, empowerment, and focusing on our clients and their own goals and preferences. Our clients are their own subject matter experts, and we need to believe them and trust in that process. That's not going to come through consequences or reprimands or, you listen to me, those type of statements. It is really about focusing on the client and empowering them towards change. It helps a lot to remember a time when they were independent, when they were in control, to help regain control. Principle 3 is about providing the minimum amount of assistance necessary for the shortest amount of time. It's about things like short-term rental assistance, financial assistance, utility bills. It's a progressive engagement for progressive engagement to help solve their current housing crisis.
Dominique, I noticed I didn't catch that says maximum assistance, and it should say, you said it right. It should be minimum assistance, not maximum. So just wanted to point out that what Dominique said is absolutely correct.
You can tell I wasn't even reading the slide. I apologize for that correction. Yes, absolutely. It's the lightest touch possible, because again, if we're looking at, let's go to the big example of someone who has high blood sugar, right? We're not starting with amputation, right? We're not starting with major serious medication. We're starting with, let's work on a healthy diet. Can you do this for 6 months? If not, then we move to the next step. So it's about a minimum touch, light touch, and building on that client's strengths. Okay, can you work on dieting? Can you work on reducing or replacing or supplementing these different things in your life to prevent this long-term, debilitation? So then we look at principle 4, which is about maximizing community resources. A diversion specialist, somebody who's wanting to use diversion in our community, has to have a active working knowledge of resources in our community. And you cannot sleep on that, because our resources are changing so quickly every week, especially with some of our COVID CARES dollars, right? There's a new resource in our community. So there's always this pursuit of learning within our diversion specialists to serve their clients as best as possible. Because if we don't know what resource to connect them to, if we're connecting them to the same resource over and over again, we're either going to dry up those resources. Resources change too, right? 2 months ago, a program might have been accessible on Monday and Wednesday. Today, it's accessible on Tuesday and Thursday. So we have to stay on top of our community resources to be able to effectively serve the community. And also the 5th strategy is the right resources to the right people at the right time. If you look at the example I use for this is, some of us, if you've ever done old school case management, you have a 2-3 inch binder with every resource that every business card, every brochure that you've ever come across for resources. Not every client needs that entire resource, right? Not every household that we work with needs a 3-inch binder. So we have to figure out what matches their current circumstance. What do we need to address? What's the biggest presenting problem? Making sure we're matching the resources to the right people at the right time. And again, clients are their own experts, and we need to believe in that so that they believe in themselves. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Avery.
Dominique. Hi, everybody. Avery Slager. I am the Director of Quality here with, oh, sorry, my screen has decided to go crazy. I'm so sorry. I am the Director of Quality and Performance Improvement here with the Homeless Leadership Alliance. So we've talked about diversion as a project, and we've looked at an overview of the activities, but now let's take a look at diversion as a process. Through taking the 4 steps that we see on the screen, we're going to be able to divert somebody from going into a shelter, making a bed available for someone else who may otherwise be sleeping on the street, and above all, preventing families, children, individuals from having the experience of trauma of homelessness. So let's look deeper into these processes. When we talk about introductions, it's more than just doing an introduction of yourself. That's part of it. Hi, my name is Avery, and I work for the Homeless Leadership Alliance. I am then going to get into the conversation and start building rapport and a relationship. So the purpose of the meeting is to help you and your family find a safe place to stay. Typically, shelters in the area are very full, and the goal is that we brainstorm alternatives to staying in shelter. The hope is we can find another safe place for you to stay other than a shelter, or help you return to where you were previously staying. My body language, paraphrasing, empathy, all go into this introduction. Establishing that helping relationship through meaningful communication is what's critical to developing that client engagement. So we're using active listening and motivative interviewing. So we need to be solution focused. We need to know that being solution focused is that the person and the family is not the problem. The problem is the problem. So we're active listening, being integral to that problem-solving conversation. Those familiar with motivational interviewing know how impactful those techniques can be. And key to all the interactions are that we are non-judgment. We're moving forward. What does the client and the household need? What are they interested in? Can they live with families and friends? Can they return to their own residence? Are we seeking new housing? Our next step in the process is to hear. We know that homelessness is a crisis. We're aware of how anxiety is the enemy of that creative thinking. So from strength exploration, we identify gaps and opportunities. We're linking to childcare. We're freeing clients up to be able to work that. We're linking to employment resources, disability advocates, mental health resources. Who maybe has helped the client in the household in the past? Do we have allies, friends, families? Our role is to look at the interplay. We're looking at everything around the client and not just the family itself, but we're looking at the environment, the physical surrounding, psychological, financial, and social factors to our clients. All this will help us navigate the process. And with that, I turn it over to Kitty.
Thank you so much, Avery. Firstly, apologies. My camera hasn't been working for the last few days and we were trying to get it fixed, but alas, I am here. Kitty Dean again, lead diversion with the Homeless Leadership Alliance. Now I have the real pleasure of sharing 3 success stories, each from the different strands of diversion we touched on earlier in the presentation. I'm going to start with a targeted prevention case, Marie's story. This single mom was facing enormous uncertainty, having no way to pay her rent or utilities in the absence of her partner. Marie's greatest fear of losing her home and having to uproot the children was a real possibility. And we know studies have found mothers have higher rates of depression, even several years after eviction. And we're also aware of how a mother's mental health is highly linked and is in fact the best predictor of their children's mental health. Thankfully, as she lived in one of the 5 targeted prevention zip codes, she was linked to Directions for Living Prevention team, who were able to offer both financial and case management support until her partner returned home. Marie's family remains stably housed, and she's hoping to secure employment that will increase the family's financial stability and Marie's independence. Next, we have Michael's story. Michael, this is from the eviction diversion team. Michael, like so many others, had sadly lost employment due to COVID and was facing eviction. The eviction diversion team successfully mediated with the landlord against filing. And we all know, of course, how much of a barrier to accessing decent housing a recent eviction can be. Through housing navigation efforts, a property was found and the family was given help with moving costs and 2 months' rent. Michael's family, who had never faced the trauma of housing instability, were now able to move forward with their lives and remain stably housed. Finally, we have Paulina's diversion story. This is a single mother of 4 who was rendered homeless after her landlord decided to sell his property. The diversion specialist and Paulina spent time discussing the possibility of her 2 children staying with her sister, while she and her youngest 2 stayed with an aunt. Diversion funds were provided to pay towards her aunt's utilities and a groceries gift card for her sister to alleviate some of those financial pressures their families would incur. And over the course of the next 4 months, with the help of a supportive environment, Paulina was able to secure employment and found an apartment. Diversion services were able to successfully advocate for family services initiatives, and Paulina was able to receive moving cost assistance. The family are now reunited and can enjoy the stability of having their own home. Thank you so much for your time. Over to Avery.
Thank you so much, Kitty. I think the most important thing to note as we wrap up here is that regardless of the intervention, if it's prevention, diversion, eviction, diversion, that all programs and processes are rooted in that client empowerment, progressive engagement, and that every involvement is solution focused. The problem is the problem. So hence the strength exploration, we can identify gaps, opportunities, and respect the clients in order to eliminate the barriers so that we can then achieve stability. And with that, we'll talk about questions.
So Avery, I've been kind of tracking the questions in the chat, and Dominique may be a good one to answer this one. Teresa asked about something that happens quite often in our community where a trailer park may close and folks need to be relocated, or when a family is going to become homeless because of codes issues. Is prevention and diversion an appropriate intervention at that time? And I believe in many cases it is, that it might not be diversion just with the HLA, right? There's the chores program through Pinellas Opportunity Council who can help in some of those codes cases. In St. Pete, there's the, I think they call it the neighborhood team. But often our entire community comes together whenever folks are going to have to relocate from a mobile home park. So I thought I would turn that over to Dominique for just a minute, since she's been involved in some of those situations, and talk about what we do in those cases.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So yes, we have been a part of a few mobile home shutdowns actually over the past few years, as well as some codes compliance issues. And it goes back to kind of that program and process idea, right? All of us have the tools and resources to have diversion type conversations and resources. But sometimes it helps to call in some extra people. So our diversion team has gone out for those situations. Of course, we have to remember, like I said, our clients have strength and they have power over their own situation many times. So sometimes just because a mobile home is shutting down, or because I know just recently a hotel shut down, and the small hotel shut down, and actually outreach, Directions for Living, I think you're on the call, outreach and the PATH officer responded to that community. And there were only 2 people that potentially needed to access homeless services because there weren't alternatives in the community. So we have to believe and have, understand that our clients are going to resolve. They have resources, they have strengths, they have successes, and leaning into those pieces. We're not jumping in as a savior or to fix the problem. They can, they're the narrator, they're the writer of their own story. So trying to find a balance in that, I think, has been the hardest challenge for us and for the community. We partner with some of our eviction deputies. They call us when they know cases are more complex, when they know this person does not have a solution and needs assistance with maybe some more long-term placement, also sometimes with shelter placement. So we do see those cases, and we welcome and continue those partnerships moving forward.
So Dominique, one more question that I think you might be the best poised to answer. One of the things I saw in the chat, you were explaining to Mickey, but I feel like it's something that as a community, we really struggle to understand when HUD dollars can be accessed. It all hinges around literal homelessness, at risk of homelessness, and those particular definitions. And so you and Mickey were kind of talking through in the chat an example about a hotel. And since this is what happens most often in our system, do you think you can kind of talk that one through?
Yeah, I want to just frame the definitions of homelessness, right? So we have the literal homeless definition, which is a place, someone that is staying in a shelter, a place not meant for habitation, like a car park, condemned building, place like that, or a hotel paid for by a program. That is HUD's definition of literal homelessness. Then we talk about the at-risk definition, and the difference between at-risk and literal is access to resources and support network. At risk is the person will become literally homeless and lacks the resources and support network in order to obtain permanent housing. If they had a resource, which literally is money, right? Money is a resource, then they would not be entering literal homelessness. A friend, family member, something like that. So that is the linchpin between at risk and homeless, resources and support network. That's what diversion does. Links people, reminds people, accesses resources and support network, identified through that client's strengths. So when someone is staying in a hotel, there is client choice in that. People can choose and do live in hotels and can maintain those hotels. But when that resource, they can no longer pay for it, they can no longer maintain it, comes into play, that's when they're starting to access, that's when they may be entering the homeless service system. That's when they're calling and saying, I'm out on Friday, I don't have any more money, I get paid on Tuesday. That resource is coming on Tuesday, that resource isn't there today when they're being exited from the hotel. And that's when diversion can step in to try and prevent that literal homeless episode them entering a shelter or the street or something like that. When they are in, if that hotel can continue to be maintained, that's when there should be accessing prevention services. For our families, an excellent prevention service, or excuse me, prevention/financial assistance service would be FSI program through 211 that can be accessed through 211 with JWB. If there's a family with minor-age children who's maintaining in a hotel, they should not be accessing shelter. Shelter should be identified and prioritized for those who are literally homeless. And so those who are maintaining in hotels can get connected with prevention resources to help them move into their own, a new place on their own. Talk about empowerment. If you can find and identify your own place and have buy-in in that process, you're going to be more committed to that outcome into that program. So does that cover kind of what you were?
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any other questions.
Thanks, Dominique. And I think I just underscore the example you gave of the resource of payment being there on Tuesday. Diversion is not financial assistance, just paying that money so that they can then get through the next week, right? It may be calling and mediating with the hotel for them that they'll have the money on Tuesday. So prevention programs are more costly and often have more financial assistance attached to them than diversion. Diversion often doesn't require as much financial resources. The other thing I would mention that we're often having to kind of talk through in the COC and with HLA team as we're thinking about interventions is, we have a lot of financial assistance programs out there. The difference between financial assistance and prevention is that prevention comes with case management, and financial assistance just clears the problem of the financial need. And so I wanted to make sure we talked about that. So we had a couple other questions in the chat, and I know Mickey's hand was up. It's down now, so her question may have been answered. But Trinia was asking about unmet programmatic and clients' needs and whether ARPA could enhance prevention and diversion efforts. So I'm going to start on this and maybe let Kitty follow up on the things that they often hear the most from clients since they take those calls directly. Trinia, I will always advocate that we are going to need more diversion and prevention resources, right? It is less costly, more fiscally prudent, and less traumatic for us to help on the front end versus, once somebody has already become homeless. That doesn't mean that's ever going to take away the need for the other services once people do literally become homeless. But if we can even take away 10% of the people who come into the system would make a huge difference for us. I think there is going to likely be resources with ARPA that can be advocated for. A lot of that guidance from the Department of Treasury is still in process. We do plan on presenting to Funders Council this month something about home ARPA, which is a whole separate pot of ARPA that is not included in the big pot that everybody keeps talking about as a community. So we'll be introducing what some other communities have done during the pandemic successfully that might be things we want to consider in our community with home ARPA. We will also be talking to funders about ESG-CV and CDBG-CV because one of the challenges we have found is aligning all of the various resources to meet those unmet needs and critical gaps. So I wanted to mention that, and then I will let Kitty talk about the things that they are most often hearing when folks are calling in need of assistance.
Thank you, Amy. So a lot of the issues that we come up against that are really difficult are the unaffordable housing, people, the working poor, people on fixed incomes that are about to be homeless. My place is being sold after I've lived there for several years. The landlord wants to sell. I'm certainly coming up with a lot of those cases right now where I guess landlords have found that they can perhaps charge more money or sell their places for a lot more than they were expecting previously. And we're getting so many people, like I say, on very low incomes looking for housing. They don't particularly want to relocate, especially if they've been here a long time or they're older. And that's just very sad because, as you all know, affordable housing in Pinellas is getting more and more scarce. And we also get very sad cases of people with medical needs, needing a place where they can have care as well as a roof over their heads. Very difficult to coordinate care for people with very low incomes and medical needs. So those are the things I think we struggle with the most.
Okay, other questions?
Hi all, Sam Picard, HLA board or COC board. I'm curious about, sort of strategically curious about, how do we balance the sort of looking for those broad swath of resources versus coordinating resources in one place, which is what I understand to be one of the big strengths of the idea of a COC in general. So like, you know, we have all these resources for prevention and diversion that are scattered across the county. Like how do we balance bringing this together in the expertise that HLA employs versus sort of like what's dispersed?
Yes, Sam, I mean, I'll take that one since it's funding related. I think that's a really big question, right? Many other communities that have been successful at moving the needle are what I would call a unified funding agency, where the dollars actually come into them and are then distributed. That's done in Hillsborough County even. So the county and city don't do social action and some of the housing components that runs through the COC. And then they have a unified funding application and people are able to apply for some of those resources. So, you know, in order to become a HUD funded unified funding group, I don't think our numbers are likely to ever let us get there. It's certainly, you know, one of those markers of success that we can keep looking towards. But I do think there might be some opportunity to have more conversations with local funders and the community about whether that makes sense. And you see funders from time to time do that alignment themselves, thinking about, you know, do we want to fund lots of folks in small amounts so that every agency is sprinkled, or do we want to do deep impact funding? And I'd say that that's a conversation that the philanthropic community really, I think that pendulum swings a lot, right? And, you know, there's pros and cons to both sides. I know that doesn't firmly answer the question, but I've seen it go both ways.
Yeah, I think that's a question that sort of goes to all of what we do, right? Because there are areas, I think about rapid rehousing, where sometimes the bottleneck is in the system itself, that we have some funds that we can't always use for rapid rehousing because we don't have enough staff resources to provide the case management. But I think in other cases, like it's no good if all of our people at risk of homelessness are calling 75 people, then we're burning a lot of time doing that, and that's unproductive work. But it's really hard to balance, especially because I think with prevention and diversion being the classic example, maybe there's so much that we don't even see as a system of care. Like we don't have any idea who does some of these things.
I mean, one place that I think that there might be some fruitful conversation, because it isn't, you know, large agencies and usually private donors can be a little more nimble, is looking at what faith communities do, right? So right now, every church does their own little pot of funding to put people in hotel, to do a variety of things that keep people from becoming homeless. So is that something that we bring together faith leaders and have some conversation about when they're working together, how that can make a bigger difference? And maybe they even are part of a group that determines where that funding goes and, you know, percentage of allocations, but that might be one place where that conversation is a little bit easier than, you know, government entities. And then we all, you know, I think in that case, everybody wins, right? So instead of being able to help one or two people as a small faith community, because they were able to leverage their dollars with other people, every church can say they've been able to help 10, 20, whatever the group is. So yeah, I think you've also seen that some in county funding this year for social action. I don't remember if it's been that way in previous years or not, but they had a pot set aside that was for large grants. And then they had a pot set aside that was for smaller grants and reviewed those separately so that, you know, there was the ability to do some of that deeper impact work and then make sure that small organizations, which is a part of our strategy towards equity, small organizations weren't left out. Other questions? Quiet group because it's Friday and everybody's excited to get an hour of their life back. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Thank you for being with us this morning. I appreciate you caring enough to learn more about the system, and feel free if this later sparks any questions or ideas, especially around ways that we can align resources or upcoming things with the ARPA funds, let us know and we can slot that for one of the upcoming committee discussions. Bye, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take
Thank you
care.
so much. Thank you.